Καλησπέρα σας. Είμαι η Μαρία Γεωργοπούλου, η Διευθύντρια της Γεναδίου Βιβλιοθήκης και είναι μεγάλη μου χαρά να σας καλωσορίσω σήμερα εδώ στο Κότσεν Χολ, στο αμφιθέατρο της Αμερικανικής Σχολής Κλασικών Σπουδών στην Αθήνα, για μία από τις εκδηλώσεις μας που είναι λίγο διαφορετικές από τις ομιλίες και τις επιστημονικές εκδηλώσεις που κάνουμε, αλλά επειδή υπάρχουν μερικοί τους οποίους δεν αναγνωρίζω στο ακροατήριο, θα μου δώσετε τη δυνατότητα για μισό λεπτό να σας πω δύο πραγματάκια για τη Γενάδιο, που είναι ένα πολύ σημαντικό πολιτιστικό ορόσημο στην Αθήνα. Είναι μια βιβλιοθήκη που έχει 150.000 βιβλία, αρχεία και έργα τέχνης, που έχουν να κάνουν με την ιστορία του ελληνισμού, και ουσιαστικά είναι μια επιστημονική βιβλιοθήκη που απευθύνεται σε ένα κοινό ερευνητικό και σε Έλληνες και φιλέλληνες και άλλους ερευνητές που τους ενδιαφέρει η ιστορία του Βυζαντίου, της Ορθοδοξίας, της Αναγέννησης, της νεότερης εποχής, του διαφωτισμού κτλ. Από την ίδρυσή της 100 χρόνια πριν, η Γενάδιος υπήρξε πόλος έλξης αρχείων που τώρα φυλάσσονται στο τμήμα αρχείων της Αμερικανικής Σχολής, τα αρχεία του Ερίκου Σλίμαν που ανέσκαψε την Τρία και τις Μικίνες, την ιστορική οικογένεια Δραγούμη, πολλά αρχεία της γενιάς του 30, τα αρχεία του Σεφέρη και του Ελίτη. Όπως βλέπετε, είναι πραγματικά ένας θησαυρός. Ανάμεσα λοιπόν σε αυτά τα αρχεία έχουμε και δύο αρχεία που έχουν να κάνουν με τη μουσική, το αρχείο του Δημήτρη Μητρόπουλου και το αρχείο του Ηλία Πετρόπουλου, που αν και δεν είναι μουσικό, έχει πολύ μεγάλη σημασία για την ιστορία του ρεμπέτικου. Σήμερα θα μιλήσουμε για παραδοσιακή μουσική, για πόσα
how many things we are taught through music regarding our national identity, things that will be elaborated by Andreas Zombanakis. Our music tradition, local and deeply Greek, is something that we want to showcase and share with us, but not only us, of course, who feel understand it due to our language and due to the place we live in, but also want to share it with a broader public audience, non-Greek. So from now on, we will continue the events now, from now on, in English. And if you have your headsets and if you need interpreting, you can listen to simultaneous interpreting.
I'm Maria Georgopoulou, the director of the Gennadios Library. It's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to this musical event about the music of Western Crete. The Gennadios Library is a gem in the heart of Athens with 150,000 of books, archives, and wonderful works of art. It's a place that invites and serves researchers who are interested in the history of Byzantium, of the Renaissance, of the early modern Europe, but mostly about the history of Hellenism. The library, since its foundation in 1926, has attracted wonderful archives and personal papers of very famous people like Heinrich Schliemann, the excavator of Troy and Mycenae, but also the papers of Nobel laureates Odysseus Elitis and George Seferis. Among its treasures are also archives of musical people, Dimitri Mitropoulos, and also the archive of Ilias Petropoulos, which is very important for the history of Rembetiko. And it is within this context that a few years back, Andreas Zombanakis, who is the chairman of the overseers of the Gennadios Library, has urged me and urged us to start thinking about traditional music as a way to understand and appreciate our identity. So the library was inaugurated in 1926, and in the 100 years that it has been so important for the intellectual life of Athens, it has attracted many benefactors. For the past 30 years, the overseers of the Gennadios Library have been vital and crucial in expanding the horizons of the library and in infusing in it new blood, and with the attempt to open it up to an ever wider public. In this context, about 8 years ago, Andreas Zombanakis took the reins of the Board of Overseers of the Gennadios Library, and he has truly revitalized the board, bringing fresh ideas for programs and events. Mr. Zombanakis is a Greek of the diaspora. He's from Western Crete, as I'm sure we will know very well by the end of the program tonight. But I will let him talk to you about this. He's a well-traveled voyager, as Ioannis Gennadios would say. He has studied archaeology, architecture, and business. And he's a person who has been very inspiring for us all. He's thirsty for knowledge. He's enthusiastic about the things that he likes and appreciates, so the things that he likes but does not know how to appreciate. And he really delves into and tries to make sense out of them. So this is the context for tonight. This is the context, and he has taken it upon himself to actually be the interlocutor with very important people who know about the musical scene, and to make us understand the sort of traditional music of Greece. So I will let the evening begin. I will disappear from the podium and not embarrass him anymore. And please welcome Andreas Zombanakis.
So I don't know if you can hear me. So first things first, turn your phones off, please. Okay. So Maria was very kind. So we've had events on the music of Epirus, we've had events on the music of Pontos, we've had events on Jewish women singers of Rizitiko, and this is Crete's turn. And I am from Western Crete, from a village called Kalives in Apokoronas. And in one of our trips to America with Maria, we were very lucky, or I was very lucky, to learn about this archive that I'd never heard about that's at Harvard University. And it turned out that Panagiotis League, who's going to lead this evening's event, not only was the person that worked on this archive, but is also on one of a member, I think, of the managing committee of the American School, and also is very involved in choosing fellows that come to the Gennadios every summer. So we're very lucky to have him here. Panagiotis has a PhD in ethnomusicology from Harvard University. He's a musicologist, a performer, a composer, and currently serving as associate professor of musicology and director of the Center for Music for the Americas at Florida State University. He is a descendant of sponge merchants from the island of Kefalonia and the shipbuilding center of Galaxidi. He spent much of his childhood in the Greek migrant community of Tarpon Springs in Florida, where he was immersed from a young age in traditional music and oral poetry of the Greek Aegean. An interdisciplinary scholar and practitioner, he publishes widely in academic journals and performs globally, bringing a lifetime of practical experience to his analysis of the social and political dimensions of Greek music and dance. His first monograph, Echoes of the Great Catastrophe, Resounding Anatolian Greekness in Diaspora, was published in 2021 by the University of Michigan Press. His work has been recognized with multiple awards from the Fulbright Foundation, the Modern Greek Studies Association, the Society for Ethnomusicology, and the American Musicological Society. He has twice been named a Master Artist by the Florida Folklore Program. Amongst his many accolades, most relevant for us this evening is that Panagiotis League oversaw the cataloging, digitization, and online publishing of the James Notopoulos archive, which tonight is largely about, and is also responsible for maintaining the metadata associated with the collection. Panagiotis, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Kalispera. If I may, before we begin the official part of our discussion tonight, I just want to say a few things. Number one, a very, very warm thank you from the bottom of my heart to the Gennadion and everyone associated with it for this invitation, to Maria Georgopoulou, to Andrea, and to everyone who has made this event possible. Being a rather bookish person, as you probably gathered from this introduction, it's always a joy to be in a library, and it's very hard not to run into the stacks and and start to devour books. But it's a particular honor for me to be here tonight for a few reasons. It's at least a triple honor. I could probably find more reasons, but time is short. About almost 25 years ago, I set foot on the campus of the American School for the first time, not for any academic reason, but because I was living here in Athens, immersing myself in traditional music, and becoming fast friends with the other three musicians who you'll meet in a little bit. And I got an email from a neighbor of my aunt's back in Florida, a young classicist named Jim Sickinger, who was here as a fellow. And he said, "Hey, I'd love to meet you. I found out that you're in Athens." So we had coffee here, and I was looking around at this place, and of course I didn't have access to the library. Jim Sickinger now is my colleague at Florida State University, entirely coincidentally. So it's really amazing to be back in this context. It's also just a really wonderful experience and a great honor to be here speaking about this particular archive, because James Notopoulos, who we're going to speak about tonight, was in residence here at the American School of Classical Studies while he was doing the field work that resulted in this quite amazing collection. And I spoke very briefly with his son, Philip, who lived here as an 8-9-year-old child and who was present, who was accompanying his father on these fieldwork trips, and he said to give all of you a giant hug. So I can't do it personally, so and also it's really a pleasure and a joy to be joined in a little bit on stage by three of my very best friends in the world who are going to help me give you all a taste of how a lot of this music is currently performed today, not by professionalized musicians who spend a great deal of their time performing arranged versions of this music on a stage, but just for the love of playing music together and of sharing traditions that we all appreciate and that move us very deeply. And I think, the theme of resistance we're going to see very clearly in terms of the poetry that we are going to examine, why resistance is a key theme. But someone asked me earlier, said to me, "I'm very curious to see how music can be an act of resistance." And I was just thinking about it, and I think there's a bunch of reasons, but choosing at any point in time, but especially in our time, to play music with people you love purely for the joy of doing so is an act of resistance against a number of things. It's an act of resistance against boredom. It's an act of resistance against complacency. It's an act of resistance against the temptation to just turn off your brain and engage with the world through a screen or things like that. So it's really a deep pleasure and honor and joy to be playing music tonight here with three of the people I love most in the world and who have accompanied me on my my lifelong journey through this music. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. I think let's talk a little bit about this evening.
Sure.
So Notopoulos was a very interesting character. So tell us a little bit about him. Tell us about why we chose this title, Crete, the Music of Resistance, and tell us about the archive.
Sure, absolutely. Konstantine.
Yeah.
So James Notopoulos, Dimitrios Notopoulos, was born in 1905 in the Peloponnesian village of Altoona, Pennsylvania, in the United States. I say that in jest because there was a large population of people from the Mani and from other regions of the Peloponnese living in that part of Pennsylvania, which is located in the northeastern part of the United States. His parents were from a few villages near Tripoli in the Peloponnese. His father was from a town called Tegea. So Notopoulos was born in 1905. The family went back to Tegea for just a few years, I think between his ages of 6 and 10 or something like that, but then came back to Pennsylvania. And until 1952, when he came to Greece to do this project, he had never come back to Greece. He had pretty much lost his personal connection with Greece as a place. But he was deeply interested in particularly ancient Greek literature and culture. He was a classicist by training. He studied at Oxford and got an appointment at Trinity College in Connecticut in the United States, an hour or two west of Boston. He was a Homerist, so his main sphere of research was the Homeric epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and also other associated epic poetry. And he became particularly interested in the question of the possible roots in oral poetry, in semi-improvised or extemporaneous oral poetry in the Homeric epics, after spending some time on a sabbatical at Harvard University, taking seminars with Milman Parry and Albert Lord, two very important classicists.
Mm-hmm. So he comes to Greece in 1952.
Yep.
On a scholarship.
Yep.
So tell us something about that, what brought him here, and what he did.
Absolutely. So Notopoulos' colleagues, and I think I can say mentors, who I just mentioned, Milman Parry and Albert Lord, were both classicists in terms of the students and analysis of the classical, particularly Greek tradition, but they were also both contemporary folklorists specializing in the oral poetry of Slavic-speaking Muslim bards in Serbia and the former Czechoslovakia. So the two of them, in decades prior to Notopoulos' trip, had done an enormous amount of field work in those regions, and essentially had proven that not only is it possible for a highly skilled and highly trained poet to extemporize or to compose in the moment of performance epic songs that might last hours at a time. They proved that it was possible, and they also proved that people were still doing it. So they, in the Parry archive, so I'll show you, this is where I spent 2 years in a postdoctoral appointment, room C at Harvard's Widener Library. Parry and Lord deposited all of their records, audio recordings, and also mountains of transcriptions and analyses of the various ways that oral poets, Slavic-speaking Muslim poets, used a giant corpus of poetic and musical formulas and epithets and tricks of the poetic trade to extemporize the details of episodes from the lives of heroes that their audiences, in this case mostly during the long nights of Ramadan, that their audiences expected to hear. So this is the thing that is really essential for us to know, to keep in our heads about oral poetry in general and epic poetry in particular, and this also pertains to Homer. Unlike the vast majority of the media that we consume today, audiences of oral poetry aren't waiting to be surprised by plot twists about what's going to happen to the princess, whether she's going to be saved by so-and-so, or if so-and-so is going to come out from behind a tree and say, "I am your father." The audience knows basically what's going to happen. The audience knows the plot. The artistry and the artistic delight and the aesthetic delight in the listener and in the artist is how all the threads of the plot are woven together. Brilliant turns of phrase, planting a seed in the audience's memory and coming back and reminding of them later. So Notopoulos was really taken by this, and he thought to himself, well, if Slavic-speaking Muslim bards in Serbia are doing this right now, the chances are that Greek-speaking people are doing it in Greece. And so basically his idea was to do something similar to what Perry and Lord had done, but in Greece. Because, of course, even though the Greek language has changed quite a bit since the time of Homer, it's still the same language. It's still the Greek language. So he got funding from the Guggenheim Foundation and the American Philosophical Association to spend roughly a year here. He brought his family. He was housed here at the American School, and he bought some recording equipment, which his son Phil told me he learned to use after about 6 months. Of course, it was held up in Greek customs for maybe 4 months.
So I gather he went around Greece, but he spent most of his time, or a big chunk of his time, in Crete.
Well, he spent almost the first semester. I think they arrived in August 1952, and because of a combination of the recording equipment, which was state-of-the-art at the time, being held up in customs, and then the winter coming and bad weather, this was 1952, 1953, he wound up spending the first half of his trip here in Athens. But he wasted no time. He made tremendous use of the holdings of the Gennadios Library, and he also traveled around Athens and the Athens area and made a lot of recordings of traditional musicians and poets who were living here or who were passing through. But in the springtime, when the weather started to clear, he started taking various trips, but he spent an entire month. And I should say he visited Epirus, he visited Thessaly, he visited the Peloponnese, he went to Mount Athos, he went to Macedonia, he went to the island of Naxos, and he went to Cyprus. But he spent the largest chunk of time, roughly a month, May 1953, in Crete and almost exclusively in the western part of Crete. Mostly Chania with a few trips into Rethymno.
And Kissamos.
And Kissamos. And I just want to show you a few, speaking of Crete, before he left, he had written to the headmasters of public schools all over the country, as well as classicist and folklorist colleagues, soliciting information. Basically, he had a form letter that said, "Dear colleague, I plan on coming in about 6 months or 8 months or a year. If you know anybody who is an expert in traditional oral poetry, please give me their name, tell me where they live, and I'll try to meet them." And so that was how he started planning his trip. And even before he went, he was collecting published versions of this kind of poetry. All of these are from Ioannis Skoulas, a very important Cretan poet. These are the original reel-to-reel tapes, bobines, that Notopoulos recorded, that I spent a very long time with. And I just want to show you a few pictures, because he also took a lot of wonderful color pictures from his trip. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, so to speak, here's just a few pictures. You've all seen this place before?
1952.
1952, probably, yes.
Not much has changed.
Right? So the landscaping is a bit different. Although it's winter now. So.
Yeah.
We're not really sure who these people are, but probably some important national holiday. And now here are photos from his trips to Crete. These are his assistant and a few local informants of his. This, I believe, is in Vrises, Apokoron. Some very imposing gentlemen here. These are some shepherds in Horosvakion on the southern coast of Crete. Notice the baby goat. Here are some gentlemen outside of a kafenio, a coffee house, somewhere in the Cretan mountains. Unfortunately, he didn't label any of his photographs, but we're making some progress in identifying them. This one I know, these are two women in the village of Omalos in Crete, right where the Samaria Gorge begins. These are some gentlemen in the village of Meskla, Chanion. And this is during one of the information sessions right before or after a recording. And
so in seeing these pictures, sorry, anyone my age, and there are a few of you here, that know Crete, those images would have been very familiar up until, I'd say, the mid-70s. You know, electricity came to a lot of Crete in 1972, so, you know, things have changed a lot. But anyway, so Notopoulos does his trip to Crete, and was there something particularly kind of interesting about what he discovers in Crete?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So Notopoulos' main goal, what he really wanted to do, was to find, like I said before, evidence that there were people improvising, roughly speaking, improvising songs in an epic register, using all of these characteristics of epic song in the Greek language in Greece today, which today was 1952, 1953. And he found quite a lot of that in various regions of Greece. Luckily for us, and us being everyone who's interested in modern Greek culture and literature and music, and especially musicians and people who seek these things out, he did not really discriminate about what he recorded. We have absolute treasures, treasure examples of exactly what he was looking for. Oral poetry, songs being composed in the moment about specific historical events, particularly pertaining to the German occupation, the Nazi occupation in World War II. But he also recorded a huge amount of instrumental music from all over Greece. We tonight obviously are going to be focusing on just a few categories of the music in Western Crete that he recorded that pertains specifically to the Cretan resistance against the Nazi occupation. And in order to start to get into that, I just want to invite you to hold a few things in your mind as we're looking at the poetry, which we will then listen to live from our pareja of musicians and also in recordings that Notopoulos made. So pretty much everything that we're going to be listening to, and the lyrics will be projected in Greek and in English, adheres to these 5 characteristics of modern Greek folk song, and this is after Alexis Politis, a great modern folklorist. So all of these songs utilize simple and direct language. Direct is the important feature, meaning that the audience, the intended audience, the people who the poet is composing for and singing to, will have no problem at all understanding exactly what he's saying. Number 2 is formulaic composition, meaning that it's highly structured language, very predictable language, usually rhymes, and usually certain types of words, certain parts of speech fall in particular places. It's very easy to follow. But also because of the nature of the Greek language, being an inflected language where grammatical meaning changes at the ends of words, the poet has a great deal of freedom in rearranging exactly the particular order that the words happen. We do this in modern Greek all the time, of course. The third characteristic is narrative realism. The language is simple, direct, and it's easy to follow the story, but also even fantastical events are presented as if they're the most natural thing in the world. We know this, for example, from traditional songs, To Tragoudi tu ai Georgi, for example. The number 4 is extremes of heroism and wickedness. The bad guy is worse than the devil. The good guy is an angel and can do no wrong. Right? And we'll see this in particular at the end. And number 5 is the recycling of poetic and melodic material, meaning that the melodies are known melodies. They have associations that the audience is going to hear. And the poet is using phrases that are that the audience is used to. It's almost always he. I don't mean to be a chauvinist, but this is a highly patriarchal society at the time, especially in Western Crete. But the poet will sometimes take a phrase and just change one word to turn it into a new composition. We'll see that very clearly in some of the examples.
So, are we at the point now where we're going to listen to some music?
We are, but I have to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Two more things. And this is especially interesting for those of you who are Greek speakers. We're going to hear two types of poetry, both of which are in the same meter. They're both in iambic decapentameter, built of iambs, feet, short and long syllables. The first one is non-rhyming. So as you can see from this first example, and this tells us if a song is in this non-rhyming iambic decapentameter, it probably means that it traces back to the Byzantine or pre-Venetian period of wherever it's from. This is from a Rizitiko. Opses epernu potamus, 8 syllables, και διάδενα γεωφύρια, 7 syllables. Ναι. Και άκουσα κι αναστεναγμούς και ρώτηξα ιδάνα, right? Later on, in the post-Venetian period, rhyme was introduced by Greek popular culture during the Venetian period, various stages. We have rhyming iambic decapentameter, such as this line from the Erotokritos, «Ήκουσες αρετούσα μου τα θλιβερά μαντάτα, που κύρι σου μαξόρισε στη ξενιθιά στη στράτα». And this is the form that we know today as mandinades or rimes or kotsakia, this kind of thing. And so we're going to look at 3 categories of songs tonight that use this meter and these 2 schemes. By no means is this the only type of song, or these the only types of songs that Notopoulos recorded, but as you can tell, if I had free reign, we would be here until next Tuesday. So we're going to see 3 categories. The first are rhyming verse, like we said, mandinades, which are set to dance melodies. The second category are non-rhyming verse set to non-metered melodies, and this is the Rizitiko. And the third is rhyming verse, the mandinades form, that is set to melodies with rhythms, but that are not danced.
Okay, so let's hear some music. What are we going to start with?
So, we are going to start with some live music. So I'm going to welcome to the stage, like I said, 3 of my best friends in the world. In order, Mr. Venizelos Levedogiannis. Who will be playing the Cretan lauto. Dr. Periklis Skinas. Skinas is the name of my village. Skinas. He's going to be playing the... This is the old style lira. This is not the lira that you will normally see in Crete today. This one is from the island of Karpathos, but this was the dominant instrument until the middle of the 20th century among people who played the lira. And then we have Mr. Dimitris Rapakousios. Who is going to be playing the bougari. This is an instrument that not many people are aware of. It's native to, well, we could say the manner of speaking, the island of Crete, where it also used to be called bouzouki. And I'd like to point out that Dimitris is a master instrument builder. His workshop is not far from here. Many of the Greek traditional musicians who you are familiar with play his instruments. And he built both of these lutes, the lauto here on the end that Rizitiko is playing, and the bougari that he's playing. So because this is live folk music, the way we play it when nobody's listening, you'll just bear with us as we make sure we're in tune. And we're going to play some kodiyes, so a traditional type of tune for mandinades from Eastern Crete, I believe. And Periklis and I are going to sing some mandinades to ritualistically welcome you to the event.
καλώς σε βρεθούμε και πάλι να βρεθούμε. Και πάλι να βρεθούμε, και πάλι να βρεθούμε. Του χρόνου τούτο τον καιρό να ξαναγαμωθούμε. Άιντε φίλοι μας και δίκοι μας, κι αν δεν χωρεί το σπίτι μας, πάνω στην κεφάλι μας. Καλώς σε βρεθήμε, 1000 και 2000. 1000 και 2000, 1000 και 2000. Τον κάμπο με τα λουλούδα και με τις πράσιναδες.
Of course. So it's worth, I think, stressing that the recordings we're going to hear are not commercial recordings.
Absolutely.
These were recorded in cafeteria and tavernas. In many ways, the way this music should have been heard.
Or at least was exclusively heard.
Yeah. So it's these old recordings are as close as you can get to the authenticity of this music. That's what's so important about these recordings.
Yes, and I should say that Notopoulos traveled all around Greece hauling this very large and very heavy recording equipment with him. His son Philip again told me they had rented or bought a small car, and the entire family would really usually accompany Notopoulos on his trips, and he said that the two kids would be squished in the back seat with this giant box. They'd be like hanging out the window because there was so little room. And often in some of the more difficult to access villages that they would go to, the car wouldn't be able to navigate the road, so they would stop, they'd send somebody ahead, and they'd hire a donkey to come and pick up the recording equipment. Unfortunately, there's no picture of the recording equipment on a donkey, but you can imagine it. So the recordings, like Andreas said, were made in the quietest places that they could find in these villages. And let's remember, this is rural Crete in 1953. Life did not stop for the American professor to make his recordings. So they would often go to the very edge of a village in an abandoned house or in a cafenio if it was at lunchtime or nap time. And they had to use a gas generator to power the recording equipment because, of course, there was no electricity in these places. So they would put the generator out in a field outside of the cafenio, and they'd run the tube, the connector, through a window or under the door. There's some wonderful photos of that in the archive. And Phil told me that his father would be inside with the musicians, probably sweltering in the heat because they closed all the windows, and he and his older brother had to stand guard to make sure the village children didn't mess with the gas generator. So imagine, have all of that in your head while we listen to this first example from the Notopoulos collection, which is a group of men in the village of Skifu, Sfakion, singing a mandinada on a sirtos dance melody.
Κλαίνε τα σβάτια να βγούνα, κλαίνε Κρήτης. Λαβάλαβάλαβα, λέει ο ξυλορίτης. Γιατί σκότωσα οι Γερμανοί, γιατί σκότωσα οι Γερμανοί, γιατί σκότωσα οι Γερμανοί, τη λεβέδια της Κρήτης. Έτσανε κιόλας ως το λες, τη λεβέδια της Κρήτης.
Unfortunately, we don't recordings, but these are very evocative.
Well, I think silence is more appropriate to the memory of these people.
Exactly. So we're going to start now with one of the three categories.
The second of the three categories, yeah.
Which is?
Rizitika.
Okay. What are Rizitiko?
So, Rizitika is loosely a genre of songs that originate in the rizes, or the roots, literally, the lowlands of the White Mountains in Western Crete. And these, by and large, are songs that use that second category of poetry that we talked about. Same meter, iambic decapentameter, same as what we just sang and what we just heard, but without rhyme. So this genre certainly has its roots in the medieval period, in the Byzantine period in Greece. If you're familiar with Byzantine chanting, you'll probably notice some similarities in the types of ornamentation that the singers use and this kind of thing. But what's really important is that Rizitika, the second that someone who is initiated, let's say, into knowing how to listen to these songs, who's had experiences, who has experienced them in their traditional format, like Andreas and I were talking about the other day, which is never on stage, almost probably exclusively only men singing together in some type of ritual format, usually at a table, at a feast, or in a ritual situation walking from one place to another, or even perhaps spontaneously in a moment of great on a great emotional high, but usually after music for dancing has stopped. It's a very serious, almost sacred, I could say, form of music. And what's important to know about Rizitika in this context, where again, these people who had just lived through the German occupation and the Greek Civil War, to some less degree in Crete, but still, we're taking this corpus of songs, taking specific melodies, the traditional words to which everyone in their audience would be familiar with and would immediately have associations with. They were taking this melody that the audience would know the second they heard it, that the traditional lyrics would have to do with the tragic death of a hero, for example. They're taking that pattern and just changing some words to make it about not the tragic death of a Byzantine hero who was fighting a dragon or fighting the Turks or fighting something like that, but someone who they knew, or a group of people who they knew who had died just a few years before fighting the Nazis. That is what I would like you to have in mind as you hear this. So first we'll hear a Rizitiko about the destruction of the village of Kandanos. If you recall, Kandanos was a village in Selino that the Nazis destroyed completely in retaliation for the Cretans resisting them. And it's the one that famously they vowed to leave no stone standing. So we're going to hear Yorgos Stavroulakis, who was born in 1873. So he was 80 years old at the time of recording, sing this. And this is exactly what I said. This melody, which we're going to hear 3 different times, is associated with various different layers of Greek history. This first one refers to earlier battles against the Ottomans.
λιτιάνου στον κάδο, στα λιτιάνου στον κάδο, σε πιάμε ριά, σε πιάμε ριά τα λιτιάνου.
If you speak Greek, you probably noticed something, which is that I made a mistake, and I gave Konstantino a different recording that mentions not Kadanos, but a different place. But as if I planned it, this is a great opportunity just to underline what I just said. Right? These poets were taking this commonly inherited material and just changing words to commemorate specific battles at specific places. There are 5 or 6 examples of this exact same thing from the same singers doing that. So I planned it that way. So now we'll hear some live music. We are going to sing for you perhaps one of the oldest examples of a heroic and tragic song about the death of a tragic hero in the modern Greek language. This is an episode from the death of the Rizitiko, who this is a very important medieval Byzantine epic that has really given a lot of the DNA, I guess we could say, to modern Greek folk song. So it uses this same melody, and we're going to sing a scene that corresponds to all of those characteristics of Greek folk songs that we talked about at the beginning, more or less the way that we would sing it if we were in a parea in Western Crete. So this is
in 1952.
In 1952. We were a little younger back then. We hadn't gone gray, but and it's known as Odigenis Psychomachie.
Οδηγενής ψυχομαχή Κοίγης εκοίγης τον έτρωμασι Κοίγης εκοίγης τον έτρωμασι γιατί από που κοίτεται οδηγενής ψυχομαχή Κοίγης εκοίγης τον έτρωμασι Κοίγης εκοίγης τον έτρωμασι γιατί από που τσίτεται Chapu, chitete, loya, eloyandrio, menulei, loya, eloyandrio, menulei, να χαίνει γης πατήματα. Γιατιάπο, γιατιάπο, γιατιάπου, τσίτετε.
I forgot to put rosin on my bow, so it was extra traditional. And now we're going to hear, again, on the same tune that we heard the recorded example and this example of Vigenis, we're going to hear what is probably the most famous Rizitiko from the post-war period, composed by Giorgis Koutsourellis, a famous lauto player and singer from Kastelliki Samu in the Western Crete. Hitler na min to kafkithis. So again, a very extreme example of taking a melody and a theme that is very intimately known by the audience, one that is very heavy and has to do with destruction and death and loss, and using it to commemorate the resistance by average Cretan people to the Nazis. There you go. Point. We went back to 1953 for a moment. Just give us a second. βρήκαμε νομίζω.
Πώς πάτησες στην Κρήτη, πώς πάτησες στην Κρήτη, και λείπαν τα παιδιά της, και λείπαν τα παιδιά της.
This is a historical fact. The Kritiki Merarchia got trapped and couldn't get to Crete fast enough to defend it. But anyway, you see, we all grew up with these stories. So now we're going to our third category, which are ritual melodies?
Absolutely. So this is a category, I've lumped it into what I'm calling ritual melodies, because these melodies, by and large, unlike the Rizitiko, they have a rhythm, but in general they're not danced. So think of the New Year's carols, kalanda, that we have in modern Greek society, where you can clap your hands to them, but traditionally, even though they are in a rhythm that could be danced, they're used in a different context. Or like I said, the song of St. George, killing the dragon. So I think this is a very important detail, and it's something that I'm thinking very hard about, that I think hearing those melodies immediately puts the listener into a ritual space, much like hearing the melody of a Rizitiko that commemorates the death of a hero puts one into that kind of mourning space. So we'll hear just a few examples quickly. So this first one, we don't really have time, I think, to listen to both recordings, but I want you to pay attention to the underlined lines in the Greek version, which would be, of course, the 3rd through 6th in the English version. This is a song that's commemorating the Battle of Agia, or also the Malame airport, by a singer Nikolis Maniudakis. So Notopoulos recorded him singing this song of his twice. One on this day, and he made some mistakes in terms of the rhyme scheme and the structure. And so he asked Notopoulos if Notopoulos could come back the next day when he'd thought about it a little bit more. And so we'll listen to him sing this, and then we'll look at the second version. So just notice that in this first version, he talks about the German transport ships. He talks about them embarking at Malame and Agia. He talks about the English, New Zealanders, and the rest of the citizens falling like dogs upon the Germans.
Δευτέρα μέρα ήτανε, ρηχού το μεσημέρι, που φάνηκε ανιχνευτικό κι ανίχνευε τα μέρη. Που φάνηκε ανιχνευτικό κι ανίχνευε τα μέρη. Άλλη μέρα το πρωί πλητάγωγα φανήκα στο μάλεμε και στην αγιά του Γερμανούς αφήκα στο μάλεμε και στην αγιά του Γερμανούς αφήκα. Οι Γλέζοι νεοζηλαδοί κι οι πιότεροι πολίτες σαν τα σκυλιά επέσανε τους Γερμανούς να φάνε σαν τα σκυλιά επέσανε τους Γερμανούς να φάνε.
Here that his last little bit there did not rhyme. He was very unhappy about that. So then he came up with this, where he also added ta stuka. Stuka is the dive bombers that we know from World War II. I love this rhyme, ta stuka vastusa. But then he made another mistake and he said the Afrika thing again. But then he said Κρήτες, Νεοζηλανδοί και πιότεροι Αραπάδες, obviously referring to, at least I imagine, referring to the Maori regiments from New Zealand who fought at the Battle of Maleme. Σαν τα σκυλιά πέσανε τους Γερμανούς να φάνε. Αραπάδες να φάνε, it's a better rhyme. So that's one example. This is a particularly moving example. This is I believe a 15-year-old boy, Yannis Airakis, at the time, yes, he would have been 15, singing, or I'm sorry, 20, is that right? 25, I guess. He sounds much younger. So maybe that's a wrong birth date. That is the birth date in Notopoulos' notes, but I'm guessing it's a typo. This is a song composed by a woman, Irini Anagnostaki, about the Nazis burning the village of Anoia Milopotamu, that we all know about. The famous Xilouris family of musicians, of course, is from there. My friend and colleague and Koumbaros Dimitris, who's playing the Bulgari on stage right, spent a number of years living in Anoia as a child. And since he knows a lot of people, he gave this recording to the mayor of Anoia, who played it on the commemoration of the burning of Anoia. What year was it? 2018, I believe. And so both of us were there, and it was quite a moving scene to be hearing this voice from the past. This man, Yannis Airakis, had died, so he wasn't present. But I do remember an elderly priest who was standing within earshot of us saying, "Ποιο είναι το παιδάκι που τραγουδά?" Who's that little kid who's singing? So we'll hear this.
Για μην αθίζετε πουλιά, μην γελαϊδείτε, τα νόγια μας έκαψανε και να τα λυπηθείτε. Μια Κυριακή την ταχύνη ώρα που λειτουργούσε, μπήκα στα νόγια Γερμανοί τσάντατες και ζητούσι. Αντάτεσα δεν βρήκανε και καβάνε το κόμμα, γέρους και γυναίκοπαιδα κάτω τα καμανόλα. Αύγουστε Γερμανό φιλεφόνια και στα σπίτι και μαύρη ζώνη έβαλε στη σκλαβωμένη Κρήτη. Μαύρα φορούνε τα βούνα κι ο γέρας ψιλορητής, πέθουν τα νογιά το χωριό τους ήρωες της Κρήτης.
Would you like to say something?
No, there was, sorry, we have a text here. You mentioned Erotokritos earlier.
I did.
Yes. Is there an example of that melody being used in this context?
Yes, there's some amazing examples from the Notopoulos collection of the melody of the Erotokritos, which is a probably early 17th century poem written in early modern Cretan Greek by a man named Vicentios Kornaros. I believe it was first published in 1713 or so in Venice. So this is if you don't immediately, if you're especially a Greek person, if you don't recognize that word Erotokritos, you'll know it in a second. We're going to show you a live example of one of the scenes from the Erotokritos. We chose one of the scenes that is particularly warlike, I guess. So if you're not familiar with the Erotokritos, basically it's Romeo and Juliet set in a Cretan-flavored ancient Greece. And it was directly inspired by Romeo and Juliet and other Baroque-era romances. So all the heroes basically look and speak and behave like medieval knights, but they're in ancient Greece and they worship the 12 gods and this kind of thing. So we were debating about how to summarize the epic, and Pericles said, oh, just tell them that they fell in love, her dad didn't like it, he killed a bunch of guys, they got married at the end, and everybody was happy. So that's basically what it is. So we'll sing one of the excerpts where they're fighting, where Erotokritos, the hero, is fighting for the hand of Aretusa, his beloved, who is the daughter of the king of Athens. And then we'll hear a very special, very short but very special excerpt from the Notopoulos collection. Κουρδισμένοι είμαστε.
Εροτοκρίτος, η ώρα δεν το δίδει, να πάμε τώρα στου ρηγός, συνύχτα στο σκοτίδι. Αφήκασι τζαθιβόλες, στάρματα βάνου χέρα, σπιθίζουν, λάμπουν τα σπάθια και γίνει νύχτα μέρα. Στου τα ανακατώματα δυο πέσαντια ποθάνα κι 18 γεννήκασι κι αρχίζασι και χάνα. Και πάλι τούτοι κι οι 8 ήσαν ελαβωμένοι κι αγγίχτος ο τραγουδιστής κι ο φίλος του πομένη. Σιγάνα στο σπίτι τος γιαγέρνου και το ταχύάλι του ρίγος κακάματα τα φέρνου. Λέση του αφέντη κάτεχε σ' είδαμεν απόψε, άμα σε πέψεις ποιον εκεί την κέφαλη μας κόψε. Κι αυτήνος ο τραγουδιστής κι αυτός ο λαγουτάρης είναι μεγάλης δύναμης, είναι μεγάλης χάρης. Ό,τι γλυκό, ό,τι κι ομορφιά εις το τραγούδι δείχνει, τόσο φαρμάκι και φωτιά με το σπαθί του ρίχνει.
Is both a lauto player and a singer, as well as a fighter. So he's a lover and a fighter. Right there.
how you're playing.
So, in the interest of time, because there's a very special video that I really want you to see, we're going to look at my favorite example of the Erotokritos in the Notopoulos collection. We're only going to hear a few seconds of it. There are several versions of the traditional Erotokritos poem in the Notopoulos collection, but there are also a few versions using the Erotokritos melody that tell the story of the abduction of the Nazi general Heinrich Kreipe, who was in charge of Fortress Crete. As you may know, it was an extremely daring plan was hatched by the Cretan resistance and their British allies, led in part by the British super secret agent Patrick Leigh Fermor, who was a great fan of Cretan music. We'll talk about that later. So there are great chunks of the Notopoulos Cretan materials that detail the daring escapades of the team that captured Kreipe. And here's just an example. I'm not going to play this part. Just scan it a little bit with your eyes to get a sense of, this is towards the end when they've captured Hitler, or sorry, they've captured Kreipe, and they're about to take him in the submarine to Cairo. But remember what we said about extremes of heroism and wickedness, and extremes about, everything's in an epic register. So the Germans searched for him high and low and morning and night and day. They lost Hitler's greatest general. In reality, that was not really the case. The war was basically over at the time that this happened. And according to the poet, the entire population of Cairo, Egypt, rose up in song and dance, playing lires and all these kinds of things. But I want us to listen to the very, very, very end of this performance, which the poet begins with a different melody. He begins with a Cretan melody that, again, is reserved for these kinds of very slow, somber, traditional ritual songs. He then goes into the Erotokritos, sings the Erotokritos melody for about 45 minutes, and then transitions into this. So you're going to hear the Erotokritos melody that we just played and sang, and then it's going to switch and go into these lyrics right here.
Μαθαίνει η ώρα της στιγμής, για να ξεκινήσει κι ο πηγουλός, ο στρατηγός, την Κρήτη να αποχαιρετήξεις. Έβαλα τον στο υποβρύχιο κι η θάλασσα φουσκώνει κι ο ουρανός εμάνιζε κι ο χάρος του μαλώνει. Στο Κάιρο ευγήκανε μέρα λαμπρά μεγάλη και ήλιος το αχτίνες αχτινόσκοπου χρυσάφι βρεχτυπούνε πως πόλεμος σταμάτησε και δε θα ξαναδούνε γιατί έπιαστηκε ο εμπιστότερος του Χίτλερη το τσανάκι τον πόλεμον ο Χίτλερης τώρα θε να το χάσει.
So this has been quite a journey. Have you been spending time visiting the places Notopoulos made recordings in? And do you have anything to share with us about the process?
Coincidentally, yes.
Yes.
I have been spending some time retracing Notopoulos' steps. I had started doing this in full force and it was interrupted by COVID. One of the least important things that COVID interrupted, but still something dear to me. Hopefully I'll pick up the thread pretty soon. But in the summer of 2018, I mentioned before we had gone to Anoia for the commemoration of the Holocaustuma, των Ανογίων. But I visited, I want to say 15 or 16 villages in Western Crete that Notopoulos had been to in May 1953. And my modus operandi was all the same. I had put the entire collection, all of the audio recordings and all of the relevant written materials in digital form on a little stick drive. And I would take it to the village. If I knew somebody there or had a friend who had a friend, I would call them beforehand. Most of the time I just went, just unannounced, and went to the cafeteria and said, hey, do you have a traditional music club here, or a traditional culture folklore club, or is there anybody in the village who's particularly involved with these things? I would find somebody, we'd have a conversation, I'd give them materials, they'd call all their friends, we'd all get together in the tavern or the coffee house, listen to the materials, I would read to them the names of the people who were recorded, and they would reminisce, oh yeah, that was my grandfather, that was my uncle, that was so-and-so. Of course, pretty much everybody was dead. Everybody was dead. Except for two people. I found two people that summer who Notopoulos had recorded, people who were still alive. And the most spectacular of them was a man named, in the village of Kardanos, the village that was burnt by the Nazis, the one that we did not hear the song about because I put the wrong, but anyway. Again, I did it on purpose, remember that. But we were sitting there with the president of their local folklore society, and I was reading him the names of the people who sang, and he's saying, oh yeah, he died, he died, he died, he died. No, that one's still alive. He's 102 years old. But I bet if we do it right, we can find him tomorrow. So we went and found him at the place that he drinks his morning coffee. And we convinced him to come into some office that was relatively quiet. And we put his one good ear next to the speaker, and we played this recording of him himself, and his kubaros, the best guy was the best man at his wedding, and his younger brother and his younger brother's two friends. So Notopoulos had visited Kardanos, obviously in May 1953, and somebody had told him, you have to find Adonis Kalamaraddonis. He's the best Rizitiko singer in the village. At the time he would have been, like if in 2018 he was 102, anyway, at the time he would have been in his 40s, 50s. I'm not good at math. This is why I became a musicologist. But he was listening to it, and he said, oh, I remember. He said, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. So we stopped the tape. He said, I remember this American guy in a blue suit, and he was sweating really profusely, and he spoke really funny Greek. And he said, Είμαστε στη γκούρα. They were like shaving sheep. Sheep shearing. They were sheep shearing or something like that. And he said, I'm sorry to bother you, but everybody says that you're the best singer of Rizitiko in the village. And Kalamaraddonis said, get out of here, you're bothering us. I need to finish this before my wife gets angry that I'm late for supper or whatever. And he said, please, 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 I already found your brother and they're waiting in the cafeteria. So anyway, he said, we went there, and he said, I remember that my kubaros and I sang for him two songs, this one and this one, in that order. He was absolutely right. It's exactly what my notes said. He said, and then we left because we got annoyed with it, and we wanted to finish shearing the sheep, and my brother told me later that night that he and his pareja, his two friends, sang these three songs in this order. Again, he was correct. And I said, would you like to hear the recording of yourself singing? And it took a while to convince him that I wasn't joking, but we played it for him, and I'll show you the video. But it was one of the most emotional experiences of my life. He really got lost in the music, and he started to sing along. And the guy who had brought me there told me, he said, he hasn't sung in public really since his brother and all his friends died in the late 1980s, early 90s. And after he finished singing along to the song that he had sung, he wanted to hear one of the ones that his brother had sung, because obviously none of these people had ever heard the recordings. Notopoulos really wanted to go back and re-interview people and give them copies of the recordings, but he died before he had the chance to. So I feel really, because I spent so much time, and this collection was entrusted to me not only by Harvard, but by Notopoulos' family, it's really important to me that I figure out a way to do what he wasn't able to do, which is the most important thing, is give these recordings back. So anyway, Kalamaraddonis was listening to his brother and his brother's pareja sing, and he said, they always screw that part up. He said, I should have stayed. I should have stayed because I could have kept them on the right path. And he said, but then he said, he was just lost in time, just remembering this bygone era, and he said, Tonight, when I find them at the Cafenio, I'm going to read them the riot act, and I'm going to tell them, you can't, next time an American comes with a tape recorder, you need to come to me first, and we'll practice. But then he opened his eyes and he saw us, and he remembered that all these people had died decades ago, and he begged our forgiveness, but he cried, and then we cried, and then we had some raki.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's Kalamar Andonis in 2018.
Thank you for sharing that with us. It was very, actually emotional for me because as my father grew close to that age, he reverted to singing mandinadas all day. So, thank you. This has been a wonderful evening. I think we've all enjoyed it. So maybe we'll end with some music by you and your friends.
Why not?
And thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks again to the Gennadio. And again, very special thanks to Maria Georgopoulou and to Andrea.
Thank you.
For Zabanaji for inviting us. And an extra special thanks to our musicians for allowing me to convince them to bring our music out of the taverna and into Kotzen Hall. So we had on the Bulgari, Dimitris Rapakousios. On Brondolira and song Periklis Skinas. And on the Auro, Venizelos Levendojanis. As I said, Dimitris is a really wonderful instrument maker, so if you're interested in a traditional instrument for you or your loved ones, talk to him. And Venizelos is an excellent veterinarian. So if you have a sick dog or cat, or tiger, that's a long story. Periklis is also a wonderful professional, but he's a philologist in Iraklio, Crete, so if you have a kid who wants to transfer high schools or middle schools, they can. So we'll end with a selection for you. I mentioned the great British agent Patrick, or Paddy as we prefer to call him, Patrick Lee Fermor, who was embedded with the Cretan resistance troops in World War II and was one of the chiefs leading the operation to kidnap General Kreipe. Fermor was, among many other things, a great lover of music, and there's one particular Cretan song that he loved so much that its title became his code name, which was Philedem. So we're going to play this song Philedem, and then we're going to play a Pendozali dance for you. So feel free to Pendozali your way, to five-step your way out of Kotzen Hall. So thank you again very much for coming, and thanks for being here. Είμαστε ευτυχισμένοι. Καλά είναι.
Η καρδιά μου σένα θέλει, η καρδιά μου σένα θέλει, έτσι έτσι θέλει.
Ευχαριστούμε. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Ωραία. Μπράβο, Μάκη.
Συγγνώμη, αν κατεβείτε κάτω, έχουμε κρασί, νομίζω και τυριά και διάφορα παξιμάδια.
Μια τσικουδιά.